morning from Roca Shanghai Gallery. A good afternoon for those who are joining us from China. I would like to present where we are here in Spain, in Roca Barcelona Gallery. Roca galleries are buildings that would like to connect professionals from the architecture, design, with people interested in design, sustainability, management, innovation, throughout events, exhibitions, and other meetings. You can also find Roca galleries in Madrid, Lisbon, London, Shanghai, Beijing, and very soon in Sao Paulo. We are very excited of this new opening. Today, thanks to the Foundation Mies van der Rohe and with the collaboration of XJTLU University and Roca, our company with more than 100 years of expertise designing, producing, and manufacturing sanitary wear products, we are celebrating the third meeting between China and Europe following the topic of the Superblocks and public space. Here we have the expert, Ivan Blasi from Foundation Mies van der Rohe, and Yvette Gasol from Theatre Studio. Thanks all.
Thank you very much, Raquel. And we wish to welcome today all the people that are here in Roca Barcelona Gallery. We're also showing this via YouTube. And we are also very happy to also count with the director of the Mies van der Rohe Foundation, Ana Ramos, who is also with us following this, and obviously with Yvette, but also with all of you over there in Shanghai and Beijing, Roca Galleries, together with all the team from the XJTLU University, where we have Davide Lombardi and Jose Ramon, who are also the ones that have made it possible to have the exhibition that we're showing in the Shanghai Roca Gallery, together with the videos of the EU Mies Awards 2022 in both galleries. So on the one hand, the EU Mies Awards have been delivered and have been organized in a collaboration with the European Union since 1988, and together with obviously celebrating architecture and the buildings and projects of public space, urbanism, and landscape that are the winners. What's also very, very important is that from the discussions of the jury members, of the nominators, the experts, and all those people throughout Europe that discuss on the projects, the more recent projects from European contemporary architecture, that we can also share this debate, this discussion with everyone throughout Europe, but also further away, which means in the Americas, in Africa, in Asia, and so on. So this has been a really good opportunity for us to collaborate on the one hand with the university, because the EU Mies Awards this year is also organizing the young talent. So every other 2 years, the prize is not for built pieces of work architecture, but for final diploma projects from all over Europe, and sometimes also with the guest countries which are invited to participate. This year we're doing it with African countries. So we're also very interested in adding to this discussion what happens in schools, what happens in this threshold between students which have already become professionals and they are starting their careers from different points of view, as we know we can follow in architecture. So we want to kind of also thank the university for having organized this exhibition in Shanghai Roca Gallery, where we're showing the 40 shortlisted works, from among which there are the finalists, and there's also the 2 winners, one of them being the Kingston University townhouse building in London by Grafton Architects, and the emerging architect, which was in 2022, La Borda Operative Housing by La Col Arquitectes here in Barcelona. So today we're live also from Barcelona, from Roca Gallery, which was designed by Carlos Farrate and the OAB architecture firm, which has also participated with many of their works in the EU Mies Awards. And we're opening this debate, this discussion today, after doing it on the profession and also on educational challenges in the 2 previous meetings that we've had in discussions with Shanghai and Beijing, today on public space and specifically the notion or the idea of the superblocks. So we have different guests, but I would like to ask Davide from Beijing to also join us and share some words with our audiences. Davide Lombardi.
been, of course, a deep pleasure for Xi'an Jiaotong-Liverpool University, the design school, and the Department of Architecture, which I represent, to join our forces with Roca Gallery and the Mies van der Rohe Foundation. It has been 3 intense weeks over which we have been discussing the topics of relationship between education and architecture or professional practice, and today we come to a conclusion with the public spaces and the Superblocks. It has been an intense period of preparation in order to make sure that everything in Shanghai via the exhibition was going to be smooth and properly displayed of the work you guys do there in Barcelona and in the foundation. I'm very proud of this, and I do hope that this is the first step of a sequence of future events which will basically encompass our also international nature of our university, merging China, Europe, Spain, and even more via the guests that we have today and that we have had, which are all coming from different countries, different backgrounds, different professional backgrounds. So again, I am very happy to be here again for the second time out of 3 actually. And now I'll pass over to Jose in Shanghai.
Thank you very much, Davide. First of all, I would like to thank all the audience who came here to Shanghai, also the people in Beijing and everybody who is in Barcelona. I would like to introduce a little bit our guest, and that we have an amazing panel today. We have Jan Klosterman in Beijing from Chloe Studio. We have Yvette Gasol in Barcelona from Cierto Architects. And here with me is Sansan Chi. Sansan is an architect who was studying in the US. She was in Columbia University. She got her degree there. Then she did her master in Harvard, if I'm right. Finally, she got her PhD with the Pritzker Prize Guangzhou. And right now she's teacher in the University of Arts in Hangzhou. And also since 2013, she's director of her own office, Studio T in Hangzhou. But I think she will introduce her better, so I leave the pass to her.
5 minutes, very quickly. I'll talk about what's Superblocks, especially in China, and what we as architects, especially young architects, as a continuing understanding what's different from Superblock and what we can do nowadays. And of course, we have to start with Ranku House's SML, XL's, the article, The Asian Cities of Tomorrow, where he sort of defines the scale of a superblock and the mixed interwoven programs of a superblock, which has to be efficient. It's almost described as this new utopian, which can resolve many problems that we, as urban conditions are rising. But what defines superblock in China is quite different. Due to our own sort of recent history and the social movements. So from 1949 to the 80s, when I was born, we called it Danwei. So Danwei is this sort of national run organization or working company units, like these big factories. So you have more than 1,000 people at least, or even 10,000 people with their family. So you have to have, so this is one Danwei. One Danwei is one working unit, but it's a super gigantic working unit where you do have kindergarten, you have, social areas, you have all different sort of public programs that has to serve. So it's like small little cities. But then it's after the 80s, as I was growing as a kid, I literally see these Danweis are being demolished, and many of my parents' friends, they were working there. And they basically got job lost. So this is sort of the first periods of Superblocks has been over. And then what's taking it? It's really the even larger Superblocks that are usually bigger than 500 meter by 500 meters. Sometimes it's 1 kilo by 1 kilo. You can see that all over in many cities, in Shenzhen, in Beijing. And they were built because of the economic boom and from the private housing, so that you can buy housing unit, but without any public programs or public space whatsoever. There's no kindergarten, there's no hospital, there's no shopping around. So it's just housing unit, and that which creates a lot of problems. It's sort of unhealthy. And we call it what's from top to bottom. So it's all from these regulations. So because of these problems, and we have been having official regulations to say that no more superblocks, and the largest that you can build is smaller than 400 meter by 400 meter. So that is a official definition for what superblocks in China. But now, as young architects here, and we were really talking about superblocks when we were in school, but now we don't talk it anymore because it has so many problems. And we're trying to really looking back to what's a good living and a fun living and all these cultural and historical way of Chinese living. You know, what is a Chinese life in a way? So we are really looking back into the countryside, or what we call the xiangchun. So that this is a new definition that we're rising. So we are really working outside of urban, these superblocks, to look into what defines the new public space. So what is also, we come up with the name of Suji. Suji is a definition, like means Suji. So Suji is that urban people wants to get away from, let's say Shanghai, and wants to go to the countryside and wants to live there for over a long time period of time. And then they're being creating lots of hotels and living units over there, but without public space. So Suji is to providing public space even in those countrysides. So it's not new development, but it's more or less like a new utopian way of living. And we're still testing. And what programs should be adding in, like galleries? Do we need bookstores? Do we need small restaurants? Do we need any of these programs, etc.? So these are the projects that have been working on since 2017. And this is the Suji near Yellow River. So there are many different public spaces among living units, and they're very interwoven that from top down you can't really tell what's public and what's private in a way. And of course there are camel walking around, and we're living with animals and etc. And this is a Suji in Songyang, near my hometown. This is a mountain condition. So I'm presenting different types of conditions. This is a project I've been working on in Yangtze River site. And this is their living units. And there have been living units with different programs. And this is another Suji in Zhejiang province. Since I only have 5 minutes, I'm just quickly showing. And this is also near the ocean. Okay, so there are museums and galleries and any program that you can think of. And it's really interwoven, mixed. And this is in Tibet. So we're also introducing, really working with the village there and trying to make the village more or less like a, not just houses. We're not just developing hotels and living units, but really trying to make it a connection between urban people and people who are living there. So this is the sort of a cluster that I'm building there in Tibet. This is another cluster that I'm building in Dasongchuo village. So it's an existing village, but we are adding more programs, more private and more public programs that are trying to interwoven with these already exist areas. So this is my quick sort of share with all.
Thank you very much, Sansan. Now we are going to move to Beijing.
Thanks, Jose. So here in Beijing with me, we have Ian Klosserman, which is a German architect. He has an educational background in Berlin, TU Berlin, and then Architectural Association in London. So we can say it's quite a European background. However, he moved to China in 2005, so it's almost 20 years. So I'm sure he has quite a good, big understanding of the local context and the topic we're going to discuss today. And he founded Clue Architects in 2015 now. So we can open his presentation, and I leave the floor to Ian.
Thank you very much, David. It's really great. So we have offices everywhere where Roca is, almost in Beijing, Shanghai, and Lisbon. We operate in the fields of architecture, city planning, and interiors. Of course, when I came to China, is unavoidable to work on Superblocks. I like cities very much. In Germany, I grew up in a village, and so I love being in a big city where there's always something different going on, and where you can always find something new, where nobody knows you, but also where you can meet different types of people all the time, and also there's stuff going on all the time. But of course, when you come to Beijing, what we found is you can, as Shanshan said, you can walk for 400 meters and maybe you have one entrance, and then you walk for another 400 meters, you have another entrance. So there's a kind of lack of this streetscape, exactly because of this tradition of the Danwei, which had everything inside. So this problem of actually opening up blocks, and we do quite a lot of mixed-use projects, commercial, even shopping malls. So we always thought about this problem of basically breaking up the box and making it more porous, so that people can actually enjoy it, and creating these spaces where you sort of have a three-dimensional streetscape. So something that, rather than kind of going back to another typology, you sort of create a new typology that combines the density of cities that we need, but also creates a spectacle that makes the city open. So in our build work in Chengdu, we built these mixed-use communities with young apartments, and our idea was kind of based on this trinity of creating between the home and neighborhood and the market street, which is the street. So this is the street or the marketplace, and then we have these platforms above covering the street, which form the neighborhood, where both people that live there and people that walk through can meet, and basically create this very vibrant mixed community that is still open for walking through, but also offers a kind of different amenity to people who live there, but also different experience to people who just pass through. And in Shanghai, we've kind of found a different typology of opening up the super block, which is by raising part of this commercial volume, which is this circle above, so that people can kind of walk through and have this more traditional, small-scale spaces with terraces and open space. So balancing big blocks and not then this one, when you're really kind of building a big mall, then the idea is, or one recipe is actually that you open up the roof towards the city and making it accessible. So kind of giving back the public space that you occupy with the footprint of your building, integrating staircases, and kind of again creating a three-dimensional space. So this is a more recent under development project. It's a massive 300-meter long building where these terraces on top become public as well, and have a function with place where people can do sports, and that's another project quite similar. Again, it's sort of it would be a block, but you can actually pass over it by going onto the roof, which is also accessible 24 hours to the city. And you have this kind of park, and again, it's different from a ground floor park. You can run on this running track through the sky, and then when you walk through the place, again, also we kind of created even for the interiors this kind of streetscape. So we're really kind of trying to find wherever possible ways of dealing with this problem of the super block and making it less of a super block. Thank you.
Wow.
Thanks, Ivan. Thanks, Ian. And I'll pass over to Ivan and his guest, Yvette Gasol in Barcelona.
Thank you very much. So I would like to ask also Yvette to join me. Yvette Gazol is an architect, Yvette Gazol Ascoué, who founded or co-founded together with 5 partners. So there's 6 architects. Cierto Estudio here in Barcelona. They also studied here in the city of Barcelona. And they've won and built and are building several collective housing projects. And they were also the winners of an important part of what we call the Superblock idea here in Barcelona. We were aware that when we were speaking about Superblock, there are different contexts where we come from, historical, social, economic, and political. So the notion of that was different during the modern movement, and it's also, as we're seeing, also different in different places. So you will allow us from Barcelona to make it a bit different, and we'll do 2 presentations. I will start presenting the idea of the Superblock from the point of view of the City Council, of the City Hall of Barcelona, which has been developing this new idea or present idea and transformation of the city in the last, let's say, 7 years approximately. And then I will give the word to Yvette so that she can also explain her understanding of the general idea of the Superblock understood here in Barcelona. And also their own project before getting into the questions that we want to also speak about. So the first thing is that the size of the cities that we're speaking about, Shanghai or Beijing and Barcelona, is very different. Okay, you have 25 million people living in Shanghai. In the city of Barcelona, it's 1.6 million in the smaller city, which you're seeing over here. But however, in the metropolitan area, and if we reach the regional or provincial area, the city grows quite a lot to around 3 million or even 5 million in the more provincial area. But what you see is that the density is much higher than the general one of Shanghai or Beijing. So we have around 15,000 or 16,000 inhabitants per square kilometer in the smaller Barcelona, this 1.5 million city. And you see the evolution of the city since the 2nd century, the Roman city, we would say, throughout the centuries and up till today. So how we conceive it has become also very different, and it is absolutely important to take into consideration all these big infrastructures, the port, the airport, train systems, road systems, and then also the scale of all of us, of us. So understanding the small, large, and the metropolitan scale in order to understand all the challenges that there are. Because the challenges have to do with problems that are visible every day, which means high levels of pollution, acoustic pollution, house gas effect. There's also the involvement of traffic accidents, and that considered regarding WHO or some other statistics and so on. The city of Barcelona does not have enough green areas. So there's been this since the end of the Spanish dictatorship, a kind of discussion on how to transform the city and improve the city for its inhabitants. And so in the last years, this has continued happening with the aim of recovering public space, because we also will see or we need to understand, and that will be one of the first questions, how we understand public space. On the one hand, we understand that sidewalks, plazas, and so on are public space, but where there's cars, that's also public space, and also public museums or public institutions, those are also public spaces that we can all enjoy because they are part of the administrations that we choose, that we discuss about, and in which we also, as citizens, have something to say on their use. So that would be somehow a first step into speaking about public spaces, improving public transport and diminishing all these issues regarding pollution from the global scale to the urban scale and the scale of each one of us. So in this part, which we call the Eixample, which is this grid called the Sardà part of the city, which was built or started to be built second half of the 19th century, there's these 100 meters times 100 meters approximately blocks, where there was a street on each one of its 4 sides. And the idea of the Superblock Barcelona, which is already thinking about the whole city and not a single part of the city or so on. It's thinking about the metropolitan scale. That's why sometimes now it's not used with the plural. It's Superblock Barcelona. And the idea is that cars or streets with cars are going to only use some of the streets, but not all of them. And some of the streets will be transformed so that they can be used by pedestrians and only the inhabitants or some people that need to use those spaces. And to make that work, instead of having continuous paths for cars going from one side of this super block, which could be composed of the three older Eixample blocks, so in this case, in this drawing, it's a scheme, it's 300 meters times 300 meters, cars have to turn around on each corner. So this does not make it kind of interesting for people who want to cross the city in a faster way. Because one of the issues is also that many people cross the city of Barcelona without stopping in it. And this area of the Eixample is the one where there's more pollution, one of the most polluted areas, and where most of this traffic goes through. So there were some first proposals and that were carried on using, the urbanism, tactical urbanism by painting and slowly seeing which could be the improvements of that. We're seeing some examples over here. And then some projects in which finally the definitive form of those proposals, like we're seeing over here around the marketplace called Sant Antoni, were built using materials that can last, furniture, greenery, and all these kind of elements that make up also our urban spaces. So it changed, as you were seeing in the previous slide, from a place where cars could just go along the streets to spaces in which cars need to find other ways around the city, but not along the areas which have been changed. And we're seeing some images of that those first tests in Poblenou and then here in Sant Antoni. And, looking at this thinking of the use of the streets, the sidewalks, and those spaces in which cars continue going through, and thinking also at the global metropolitan scale, there are these drawings in which the importance of being able to walk from different points around the city, using public transport or using bicycles, has been kind of rethought, and also trying to find which are the accesses or the streets that still cars need to go through the city. And that's what's taking place right now. So actually being built, and therefore there was a competition to see how a series of these areas of transformation, in which, for example, here you see the crossing between several streets, which is approximately the same size as other public spaces that we have, plazas and so on, in the city of Barcelona, how those could also be transformed into plazas, into spaces with the priority for pedestrians, as we're seeing over here. And following these competitions, which were not only thought about in groups of blocks of existing housing that we saw at the beginning, but also accesses, so linear transformations of streets, with these images of how it could look like in the future. One of these competitions was won by Tirto Studio, and so we have Yvette to explain her experience, how she understands the notion of public space and this project of transformation of cities. So thank you very much, Yvette.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. That was a perfect introduction to our project and the competition context and so on. I don't know.
So we're going to see the PDF now. Okay, there we go.
Sorry, that's not the first image.
Is it the last?
No. Like the third one or so. Walking from the Center was the title of our competition proposal for this new green axis in the street of Consell de Cent in Barcelona. For those ones who don't know us, we are Theater Studio, a team founded by 6 architects that, as he already mentioned, all of us studied in Barcelona, in the Polytechnic School of Architecture. And this is our team, 10 architects that we mainly do social housing, interior refurbishments, now also urbanism, and hopefully someday also public services. And this is our space in Poblenou, actually, next to the Superblocks in Poblenou. So we won this competition 2 years ago, and now it's gonna be finished. Actually, today is under construction, but apparently in 2 months will be finished. So it's actually quite a quick project, no? Just 2 years for all the project and the urban construction and site. So this was the virtual image for the competition, and I'll try to be briefly and quick. Ivan already mentioned that there was these 4 streets to be refurbished. Consell de Seine was the only horizontal axis, and the other 3 ones were vertical. But this is the future plan of the green axis in the Eixample neighborhood, and it's a bit different. These are what the 4 streets that are being refurbished already, and this is a different conception in the Superblock Barcelona. No, as he was explaining, it's not about pacifying a big area anymore, but treating these spaces as an axis and using the street as the public space to change and dynamics and so on. No? So the green one, UP1, is the one that we are developing already. The competition proposal, which was a bit different of what in the end is gonna end up, was about the main goal was about to lead the people walk from the center of the street. No? Now we have to walk through the facades on the perimeter of that street, and the center is just for buses and cars and so on. So that was the main change, and we proposed to magnifies the green and the vegetation next to the facades, although that was a bit complicated because of the installations underneath and because of the blind people that uses the facade as a guideline for their walks. And also we were proposing to have some furniture, more located in the center of the street. Those dashed lines doing this zigzag represent the lights, the public lights, trying to locate them in the center as well of the street, giving this priority to that circulation. I'll go fast. You already seen this image of the previous state and the proposition of the competition. Then we worked on this document that would be a base for all the green axes for the future in this neighborhood, giving the main importance and the 3 key factors for the future of that street, giving back the protagonism and the main importance to the people. That was like the first thing. Also, having an explosion of the nature and a more presence of trees and vegetation in that areas, and also working on the sustainability of that public space, working on the water circle and so on, no, in the soil of that street. So as you can see in the left drawing, we have the previous state. So there was actually more surface dedicated to the cars than to the people. And it was a segregated street and with a clear hierarchy. And now the 100% of the space would be for the people with a main platform. Here is the change of the mobility as a diagram. I don't know if, can I, but they will not see my...
No, only the people here.
Yeah.
But you can do.
Yeah. So here would be the cross of two green axes. No, yeah, exactly. Two green axes where we would have a new square, and the cars should change their direction. And then here, in terms of nature, for example, would increase at 10% the presence of trees, and also I don't know the word in English, raíces?
The
Roots.
The roots.
Yeah, the roots. And also giving more space, more air, and more food also for the roots of that tree, of that trees. It's like... so here we have graphically this change in terms of nature. And then in terms of sustainability, I was mentioning this water circle, not trying to close somehow these natural dynamics in terms of water. It's like kind of slow, no? I don't know if the battery or some, And here, as you can see, for example, in these squares, we could have the possibility to have more area and work on that water circle in a larger scale, but also in the linear streets. It's the proposal, no, to also gain that water coming from the rain and giving it back to the soil. It's like, and the final proposal. These are the virtual images before starting the construction site. As you can see, the pavement changed a little bit because there were a lot of requirements in terms of accessibility and so on. But the idea of having these streets as a more natural spaces in terms of trees and gaining the central space for people keeps there, no? So we had 20 blocks in which we applied these criteria and strategies, and 4 squares. Sorry for the inconvenience of the commando. We end up introducing these areas in the center of the linear trams, we call them sort of living spaces, but like urban living spaces, because we found it important that not only in the intersections of the street we could find these bigger areas with furniture and so on to stay and spend some time, but also in the middle of these 100-meter long blocks. So that was like more equidistant and somehow more with more places to stay in this new green axis. And we turned, in our proposal, those spaces we turned 45 degrees as the chamfer. So I don't know how.
The corners.
Yeah, the corners.
Cut corners.
Yeah. No, as a reminiscence, and also to change the perspective in that place. No, we traditionally usually go fast and just go through that street, but maybe if you can sit down and rest a bit, or read, or have a call, or whatever you want to do there, you have the opportunity to change the perspective. This is a diagram for the structural soil and what happens underneath the pavement regarding that strategy to return the rainwater below and underneath. And these are the areas where that could happen in the surface. This is the circulation diagram, and this new system that you will not be able to go directly straight with the car from one point to the other. And you will have to turn right or left in each intersection. And these are the final plans of the street. Applying all these strategies and so on. No? You will see like almost 20 of those. And this is how Consell de Cent will end up. And we can discuss in the following minutes furthermore the proposals.
Thank you very much, Yvette. And we had some first questions that we wanted to share with Shanghai and Beijing as well. And the first one has to do with how we understand public space, how we understand public space in Europe, and how you understand also public space in Shanghai and Beijing. And as I think we have already spoken about how we're understanding public space over here in Barcelona in the context of Europe, I would like to ask Shanshan maybe first, and then you, Jan, who have the experience of having been in the United States and maybe in Europe as well, but also over there in China, how you see differences or similarities in how public space is understood. Because we've already seen that when we speak about the superblocks, the importance of the public space, the thresholds up to the limits of the facades of the buildings are very, very important. So maybe, Jose, with Shanshan, you can begin.
Yeah. So what do you think about the question of Ivan, Shanshan?
Okay, so personally speaking, I love public spaces in Europe, any countries in Europe, because I love to see people in Europe. But I really hate public spaces in China because it's so overcrowded. That's just a personal experience. But we're thinking how to changing, when I go to old streets in China, where the living conditions are actually much more natural in a way, where old people and young people, they're communicating, that they're just doing their own thing, or even it's much more relaxed for me rather than commercial public space. And we have so many commercial public space. They do look very happy and cheerful, and everybody's shopping, but I don't think that is that close to our experience in a way. So I think it's really the scale of public space. I like to be much more tied to personal scale. I like smaller streets, less things to happen rather than, sort of planned or designed public space for, sort of a controlled programs, or even just for commercial, like very repeated commercial programs.
Thank you very much. Let's go with Jan in Beijing.
I think it's a very, very relevant question. First of all, there is no public space in China. If you think of it as in the European definition, that it is belong to basically everyone. This is only a side of the sidewalk, perhaps, and perhaps the space in front of a train station. But even that is very much controlled. So when you walk through Beijing, a lot. Most of what you think is public space is actually owned by someone. So it's kind of when a developer buys a piece of land, they maybe leave 1 meter sidewalk with a place for blind people to walk. And then you start actually the kind of 30% green strip that the developer then has to pay to the city. And of course, it lies in the architects and also in the developer's responsibility of how public and of what kind of quality space they give back to the city. Very often you see, maybe just like this space in front here, you could see fences with big green bushes, so it kind of, they become very impenetrable. So that is not very very good. So, however, I think since actually in China, the only public space that you perceive is actually private owned. That means there is actually a much more nuanced and interesting definition of public space, I think, in China. It's not so black and white as it is, I feel, in Europe. It's either if it's private owned, even though people can go in, then it's not public. If you cannot go there for a demonstration, it's not public. But however, you see actually many public spaces in Europe also do lack quality. And you actually see that some public spaces here, they're very, very interesting and they're curated, they have great landscape, and they can offer new hybrids or new types of spaces that you wouldn't necessarily find if they're not really owned by anyone in Europe. So I think that the contribution from China is really about kind of easing up that definition and blurring the boundary between what's privately owned and what's publicly owned, and also using the privately owned as a model for quality public space.
Thanks, Xi'an. Goes back to Ivan and Yvette.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you want to add something, Yvette, about public space here in Europe? Because let's not forget that where there's cars, that's also public space.
Definitely. I think I'm able to speak about Barcelona, and even in Europe there are different examples. I think here, at least, because we are in the Mediterranean, and culturally, because of the good weather and our culture and society, I think it's intrinsically somehow that we feel like in public space we can do a lot of activities and so on. And yeah, it's true that there are also different type of public space, and some squares work better than others. But I think for us, has a high value, and that was very interesting. What they were mentioning in Beijing about the public owned and privately owned public spaces. Because here in Spain, at least, the trouble is about the maintenance of that space when it's private. When the property is private but the use is public, who should be the responsible to keep that space clean and well maintained? That's always the tricky question about who should assume that cost.
Yeah, I think this will also come up. I think, Jose, you also have a question.
Yeah. Well, the question that I prepared is more or less discussed. No, we are discussing about that. It's about what is a superblock. Which one is your, for all of you in your experiences in your different cities, what is your understanding of a superblock? Samson?
Besides what have been presented, I think, because as we were chatting before, you were saying that in Barcelona, the superblocks is actually defined by transportation cause in a way, that trying to more letting the transportation system, the car driving more efficient, that you sort of circle around one super block that is for car speed, and then leaving the whole block itself for living conditions, walking, bicycling. And so it's sort of in terms of speed. But what have been presented before, it's that there was no car when Danwei existed, but it's still gigantic. Everything's by walking or bicycle, because you do live within that super block and you don't ever get out. You don't even communicate. You marry with whoever is in that super block, and they raise kids. And so we always call ourselves, oh, we belong to that super block. My parents are from that Danwei. But now, it's even more interesting where, I do see very, for example, when I go to Beijing, that super block is so far away from me in a way that it really blocks me away, that I can't communicate with whoever or whatever is inside, because I can't even find that gate. So that's sort of very different definitions for super block. And for us, when we study architecture, we try to define superblocks as even more example for utopia life. It has everything. It has mixed use. It has happiness. It has fun. So that's why I was looking back into sort of the countryside prototype for superblock. So sort of trying to study what could be within that superblock.
Thank you very much. I think now we can go to Beijing with Davide and Jan.
Yeah, I mean, indeed, you could say that the Danwei was actually a very forward thinking model. It was the 10-minute or 15-minute city realized then. And then when private development happened here, actually initially this didn't happen in gated communities that were open as well. So it only happened after a while to kind of come back to this model also of kind of controlling a population, organizing them, that they were gated again. So and this again led back to the roadblocks. There was a couple of years ago, I think, an attempt by the city government to say, okay, we have no more gated communities and we have to open them up. And of course, this met a lot of protests from the owners of places when they said, okay, well, now we're going to have a road or walkway opening through your community, through your compound, because obviously people are maybe concerned about security. People might also be concerned about other people using facilities that they have paid for. So this really is actually quite an interesting topic that I don't know how you resolve that. And actually, this is what actually is my biggest question about this very nice project you guys are doing in Barcelona. How you also talk to stakeholders. Because, for example, if you're a shop owner on a street and all of a sudden you can't park in front anymore, you might lose some customers. So perhaps you're not so happy about pedestrianizing everything, even though, of course, it looks very beautiful. And, this is also about a commercial life where basically you walk through there and you have a cafe, right? Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting kind of question about these ownership issues that are very much intrinsically linked to the issue of public space. So how did you manage to do that in Spain?
That's a good question. I forgot to mention that actually cars are not banned in these streets. So the people who own shops or the neighborhood, the neighbors who live there are able to get to their own places by car. So there's actually a coexistence of different mobilities in the same space, which definitely will have to learn how to coexist with those cars and the pedestrians who will be the main users of that area from now on. But definitely the cars are sort of guests in that places, and they will have to go very slowly, as the other the Shanshan mentioned. Here in Barcelona, the Superblock, it's true that it's very related to pacifying that urban spaces, and about the mobility and the speeds, as she already mentioned. No? So cars should go at maximum 10 kilometers per hour. So that's like really slow. And the priority would be for pedestrian, no, at walking velocity, or speed, yeah. But definitely you can't, no, probably it's impossible to admit, and it has to be solved, that shops, supermarkets, and all the activities that are happening at the ground floor have their deliveries and so on, and elder people might be able to get their homes by a taxi or by their own car, and there are parkings and private parkings and so on, and those access will not be banned at all. But we all will have to learn that space is not at least just for us anymore, and we have to coexist with these different realities, no? Specifically in the Champel neighborhood, as Ivan already said, it's a very dense neighborhood, and so a lot of people live there, and the public space is limited. So originally, the interior of the blocks should have been public, but no, in the end, they are filled and occupied by other activities. So the public space in that neighborhood are the streets, and that is the exercise that the council is trying to do, to gain more public space in a place where it's not possible to have it in another area, no? And it's very demanded.
Allow me to add also that these examples, these tests, have been taking place since the 90s in cities such as Barcelona, in which streets, which were full of cars, have become places for pedestrians. And as usual, in the city of Barcelona, people discuss and are against, and we are kind of very fierce against things at the very beginning. But that is also what builds up the city, and that not everybody kind of agrees with how certain aspects of the superblocks are taken forward. But there are examples in which people that had their shops and thought that they would lose people buying and so on in these older projects and so on, finally it showed that they do have or the same number of people attending these commercial areas, or even more people, because it becomes, and then the problems are others. There's problems with gentrification and so on, but that's another issue. So Davide, I would also like to give the word to you.
Sorry. Yeah, I would like to add that we are all very critics with the changes at the beginning, as you already said, no? Because definitely we'll have to adapt and change our ways of understanding that spaces, and probably change some habits, and that's always complicated, no? Because we are very comfortable doing what we also do, and it's not easy to change that things. But yeah, here, at least in Barcelona, we have other examples of other commercial streets that previously cars were allowed there, and they changed to pedestrian areas, and actually the shops, it's demonstrated that gain even more, and their activities are growing and go better, and I think that if now we would go to that shoppers and say, no, now that street will have cars again and will go backwards, they would probably be against that now. But they were against to the reconversion of the pedestrian, some years before. So personally, I think we are always against that changes as a natural position at the beginning. But then time, hopefully, will have the answer.
Davide, back to you.
Thanks to two of you. Indeed, I think we are mostly change resistant. Then after a little bit of time, habits tend to change again. However, Yvette's words were exactly nailing the topic of my question. Was about banning cars, but rather than banning cars, the question was about banning private transportation, whether this can happen, makes sense or not. I just want to add one little detail before leaving the microphone to Xi'an. It's of course to me, it's a bit of a chicken egg problem. Can we ban cars or not? Because we are always referring to cars in terms of pollution makers, noise makers, potentially accident makers. But then we go in contrast with people habit. I want to have my car, drive my car, go door to door from my own home to my workplace. The little break I want to add to the whole of the conversation is also that the European Parliament a couple of weeks ago made the first attempt to ban selling cars from 2035 onwards. And I mean cars with traditional engine fueled by oil. So it's also in terms of which kind of energy are we going to use in the future, probably not just about car, if it is private, public, if it is electric or not. It's a matter of also of energy, how much energy we can still dig out of oil, for example, so from fossil energy. So I'm trying to open up a bit, not to stay only on the car, yes, no. And I leave to Xi'an now.
Okay, I mean that's a. I think maybe it's not so much about whether you should have a car or not, but especially when you compare to Shanghai, I've lived there as well, and I go there very often. Compared to Beijing, it's actually practical to have a car in Beijing, and you can get reasonably well from A to B. In Shanghai, it's impossible because it's crazy. The streets are very small because of the European footprint, especially in old areas, and it's also very, very difficult actually to own a parking lot. So it's actually a truism that before that, even when I went to university, it was like this. If you have bigger streets, you will have more cars. If you have more parking lots, you will have more cars. If you have smaller streets, you will have less cars. So it actually starts with city planning. So in Shanghai, they don't actually even need to ban or control the purchasing of cars as much as they do in Beijing. I think it's more natural. There's a very good public transport there, and the 15-minute city there works reasonably well, that you can get by without owning a car, where it's much more difficult, especially with kids, in Beijing, which is more of a car city. So actually disallowing it, I think, is wrong. It's actually about improving public transport, and secondly, also just somewhat creating areas that have less car traffic in it. We're here very close to Sanlitun. It's basically now also, because of a small footprint, almost impossible to drive there. So I assume less people drive there, and that is the solution for me, because what we really need to do is of course this change in transport habits throughout the world.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. With cars, I'm a promoter for bicycles and public transportations, and with private cars, it's really hard with the population here. It's very different from what's in Europe, and the public, especially with the how our cities are created with the traffic. It's not just the population itself, but with the programs, the public programs, specifically hospitals. Hospitals are always located in the very center of the city, and they're sort of a state-owned where everybody who sort of giving so much credit to them. So everybody is coming into this super center place for hospital, starting from 8 o'clock in the morning and along with the school systems. So that's what's created, super traffic, besides, you just normally go to working hours. So that's a big cause. And now we're talking about public programs and those sort of are the cause for, so with Superblocks, maybe, but it's hard to really have, hospitals and schools and all those, sort of necessary programs that are needed to attach to Superblocks, because people's mental sort of accreditation are not, even though you do have these hospitals or healthcare places with those Superblocks, but people are still coming into the very center to create traffic and with car. And when you go to hospital, you have to have a car with one person driving, one person going to the, so it's really a whole sort of a domino system.
Thank you very much, Sansan. What do you think in Barcelona, Ivan?
Oh,
And Yvette?
If you
You're the guest.
thanks. To us, to ban the cars is such a strong word, and probably it's not an option, and it's not a possibility. What we have to do is what I was saying before. We have to adapt and coexist. So they will not disappear, and there are services that need the car or the van or wherever to work or to transport. And the thing about the private cars and the private transportation, it's a balance, no, between time probably and commodity or comfort. And personally, that's my point of view. What would probably work better would be a combination of transports, no? So maybe depending on the day, I go by bike, or I go walking somewhere, or I use the public transport with a combination of another private transport. That could be a bike, a motorbike, or maybe a car sometimes. No, the problem probably is that depending on the connections or the time that you use to go from one place to another, you might use the private or the public transportation. But a combination of all these possibilities would be probably not the most natural to use. Definitely improve the public transport and at least have that public option should be is very important. But now I think we are starting to go faster with the public transport and the bike especially than the private transport, at least here in Barcelona. So maybe when that would happen, people will start changing their mobility habits.
Yeah, actually, 30 years ago, we all remember seeing images of Shanghai or Beijing full of people using their bikes to go everywhere. And here in Europe, it was the car. And this is kind of changing a little bit, not the image totally, because that image was very, very powerful. No, everybody on bikes and so on. But still, this that you're seeing right now, Yvette, no, the use of bicycles and other systems, which might kind of leave more space for other transport systems. Might be of a certain importance or interest regarding cities which obviously have grown, such as Shanghai or Beijing. But I think also, Jose, you have some other questions, or David? I think it's Jose.
Yeah, I go. Ivan. Yeah. I have one question. It's about the mixed-use typology. Here in China, it has been the way of development, the new areas of the city. And also in Barcelona, we have, for example, Lilla is a mixed-use space that is very near Roca Gallery. And And these kind of spaces, they are spaces that they are public, but at the same time, they are private owner and also is a private management. And it doesn't exist a social rule for the organization of these spaces, no? So my question is, which role do you think that, Sansan, which role do you think that this kind of spaces is playing in the cities that we are living?
Mixed use and also public and private owned in a way. I think there's a quite specific balance in between that should be reached, because here the problem here right now, there are many problems. For example, one type is one gigantic superblock, for example, which is right outside of Shanghai, right here. It's a gigantic superblock with all commercial, and it's sort of all equal large commercial areas, which actually leaves the streets sort of empty with cars. So it's just car and big buildings. And what's happening is mixed use, but it's not that exciting. And another type is much smaller scale, with programs that you can't even think of. It's sort of from bottom to up grow. And there are little private stores and private, very unique boutique areas. And I think that those are much more mixed for me than those sort of planted mixed use areas. Yeah. And also, and the third, which I find super interesting, which is happening in my own city, Hangzhou. It's a tourist city, and with lots of promoted sort of night markets. And you would think the whole street is very vivid and sort of grown, organically grown, but actually they're not. They're planted. They're government controlled. They're called walking cities or just no cars going through, but they are very sort of they're much more like statues of walking streets or statues of night market. It's and what they sell is also sort of organized, and that's sort of have a shell of organic mixed use, but it's not. So we're going through many different, very interesting phases. Outside, you think it's very mixed use, it's very vivid, but actually you don't find that quite good balance. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sansan. Let's go to Beijing with Jan.
So, of course, I think real mixed-use spaces that work need open spaces for walking. This is very important. I mean, shopping malls are not that. They're interior spaces, and it's a different environment. But they're not that. But I think commercial mixed-use spaces that are privately owned but have outdoor streets, they work, because I venture to say that even if it's public owned, there's just still always someone who manages how people have to behave and when they have to close their door, when they have to put their tables in. So for me, oftentimes I feel maybe it does require management to bring different interests together, and so in that sense, I think it's very successful. Especially, for example, the Chengdu project I showed. This would be something that would be quite difficult to do, for example, in my hometown in Germany, where actually you see many shops just leave the city centers. They're suffering, actually from shopping malls, and the space that is public, becomes, not nice if actually there's no shops in there or there's basically no life in there. So this is kind of going hand in hand. Sometimes it does require a private manager to make sure that you have a good mix. Otherwise, everyone will just rent their spaces to whoever pays more, even though perhaps it doesn't contribute anything to a successful, interesting life, or even a good mix that is meaningful to the people who live within the 10-meter radius. This somehow needs to be managed, right?
Thanks, Jan. Barcelona.
Yeah, I agree with the previous words, and I find there's an interesting field, at least here in Barcelona, an interesting field to explore in this mixed use and public and private properties use, because I find it should work, or it works well when no, they are both related. But the thing is that the private properties probably don't want to pay the maintenance of that public spaces anymore, because they find, or they think that if they sort of give this gift to the city and to the public space, and it's already sort of a loss for them in terms of the surface that they can exploit. Then the cost of the maintenance shouldn't be assumed for them, and there's a dialogue here that should be start between the private properties and the council or the public organizations to agree in what to do, and then probably the private stakeholders or owners should be more active, giving part of their space for the city, I think.
Thank you very much. I think Davide has the last question.
Yes, we have one more, which is also the last question. And so we start from here in Beijing with Ian. So you said earlier on, if you cannot demonstrate in a place, in Europe, of course, this is not public.
Yeah.
So the question is, in your experience, I would say now here in China, how do people get ownership of public space? How the normal people in the daily routine, how do they interact with the public space? How do they make them their space if this happens?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, what I like to do is, if I do go to a park, which is public, is just to try to find a bench, sit there and do a picnic. I love looking at people, dancing. I love looking at people hanging up their birds and bringing them from their apartments to give them some air. I think these are all square dancing. These are all very lovely traditions that we don't really see in Europe as such. Well, of course, you see a lot here is people taking photos of spaces that are beautiful, that maybe that have an interesting architecture, have an interesting design, or have a shop front. So there's an enormous Instagram culture here, which seems to be part of this appropriating public space, which somewhat merges into the online world. So that is also a kind of interesting experience, I would say.
There is also digital footprint on the public space. Thanks. So we'll go to Barcelona first now.
Cool. Well, I think there's a huge diversity on how people appropriate these public spaces here in Barcelona, and it depends a lot on each of us and our daily life. But I mean, for us, I think mainly it's a social space, and yeah, it's an area to do some activities. Of course, you can also do wherever you want by your own and be alone, no. But somehow the public space is under the eyes of all of us, and no, it creates somehow this sense of community, of being in the city context and not in the middle of nature. And I don't know. I mean, to me, it's very personal, and there's a huge variety of options. But yeah.
And probably also here in the south of Europe, in the Mediterranean area, how people appropriate these spaces is or has been traditionally different, maybe from the center part of Europe or the northern part of Europe, the northern part, which has to do with climate. But with climate change, we're also seeing how this is changing, and it's being appropriated differently in Germany, in the Netherlands, Belgium, and even Norway, Denmark, and so on.
Yeah, sometimes I get really surprised that in those countries, the public space is more sort of equipped, or for example, for children or so on. They have like much more interesting spaces and so on than here. That we definitely have the climate, which is everything probably, no, to enjoy, no, and be able to use that exterior spaces, and for them, most of the times the climate is not a problem. They just get well dressed, and they have that possibility, no, and in that sense, I think we still have a lot to learn and to improve in terms of the public space.
So, Shanshan?
Okay, sure. I guess there are two things I want to share. First is because of the rapid change here in our cities, because, new towns being built and new areas being built, new buildings being built, new streets. So first of all, we have to, the old public space are being demolished, and we have to get used to the new spaces in a way. So it's an adjustment of how we use it. So when I travel around within China, there are many new towns being built, but then you see it's so empty. The population is not decreasing, but then the streets are so empty because people are not used to it. But then the second things are coming up is how do we define public space, since there's so many regulations of what we can do and we cannot do. For example, we cannot sort of having many people events outside of the street. We can have parades. We can have many things that are crazily happening in Europe or in the US. But what we can do is sort of, for example, you can hang your clothes outside of the building and then people just hang things out. It's public space visually. But then we define, culturally, we define that as private space. So it's very, very different ways of appropriate space. How do we sort of sneak around to see what we can use and sort of trying to push the boundaries in many interesting ways.
Thank you very much. It's true that here in China, in Shanghai, in the communities, you can see how people, they appropriate the space. They bring the chairs outside. They are all the time outside the home. And in the new spaces, they are hiding. No, it's like they are scared of using it or making it bad. So I don't know if there is a question from the audience in Barcelona, I think.
Yeah, so we have one question.
My name is Pablo Borello. I'm a tech journalist. I don't know if you can hear me. I recently saw some statistics that, in China, in the last 10 years, they have used more concrete than the United States in a century. So they are building and building and building. So and the same thing that happened probably before, and I think you mentioned that recently, is that we had the image of people in China just moving around in bikes. And about 30 years ago, I think most of the experts, they thought that this was going to continue. So, and then they moved to cars. Do you think that China has made in the past 20 years the same mistakes that we made in the last century in terms of mobility and the use of, for example, private mobility options? And what are the challenges of this very, very fast moving in construction, and that creates other problems with climate change, with the use of energy and things like that? Thank you.
So I think we could make or ask Shanshan to answer this question, as we have two questions and we would like to maybe have them both. So it's this issue of the speed that you were speaking about, and how things have changed so fastly, and there's some mistakes which have probably been committed, which are the same ones that probably here in Europe or the States have been also done or have taken place in the last century. So Shanshan, maybe you can answer from your
very
experience.
good question. It's actually been cycles in a way, and also for example, when you're talking about people buying cars and what's the transportation type we prefer to use, for my generation, we have already gone through this private owned car period of time, and now we want to throw the car away. We want to buy bicycles. We want to live as close as possible. But then the generation a little higher than me, with kids to go to school, and just because of their facilities, they have to move further away in a way. So because the cities are growing much bigger, and they have to pick up the kids on time. So they're sort of being forced to have car, else they have no option. So there is this sort of cycling around. And then when new people come into the city, they're sort of still trying to have a goal of owning a first car. So there are sort of people are in different stages, all sharing the same areas. That is quite interesting. That's what's happening now, rather than 10 years ago, everybody wants a car and the cities are expanding. But here right now, it does have a variety of different voices.
Thank you very much, Shanshan.
And so we have the second question from Barcelona.
Thank you. I am not architect. I am a social psychologist and architectural psychology professor at the University of Barcelona. Then it has been very interesting, the different axes that you explained in all these discussion. But there are three axes that I would like to make some reflections. You talk about the use of the car in the city, but that is not an individual decision. The problem is that usually it's interpreted as individual decision. In Barcelona, if you take the numbers from the city council, we can see that the car use from citizens of Barcelona is less than 25%. All the other, it's coming from the metropolitan area. Then the problem is not the use of the public space. The problem is how we manage the public services that are absolutely insufficient. This is one question. The other question is, you talk several times about the mixed use of the public space. But what does it mean, mixed use? Because we focus only on a very few and specific types of activities, but not real mixed. Because part of our problem comes from the time that the modernity was the zoning of the city. Then maybe we have to change that. And the last is about the public space. It's public, it's not public. We appropriate about the space of the city or no, which these are psychosocial processes that have to be taken account in this analysis and in this planification. Then you planify public space without social dynamics, without persons that will use this space. Then we can improve our results if we take in consideration that. And that is not new. That started in the 60s and the 70s. Then we reached to reinvent the roof each time. But I think it is interesting to include in the mixed teams to planify all the new propositions. It was only
No, thank you very much, because I think it's three very interesting reflections, which I think we cannot answer either, unfortunately. I mean, there's things that we have to discuss, and that we have to discuss also with stakeholders, with decision makers, politicians, and so on. But I think that we all agree that public transport has to be thought in the big scale of the metropolitan areas all over. And probably this is also somehow different between the scale of Chinese cities and European cities. Unless, Jan, maybe you want to say something, or if not, we would leave it here because we've run out of time.
We actually couldn't hear very well.
Okay.
To be honest, so it would be very, very difficult also to provide an answer to such an articulated question. We only could get the articulation of it, but not the content.
What we'll try to do is to share it with you afterwards, okay? Because it was really, yes. I think, very interesting. Also, from a sociological point of view, a non-architect that has a knowledge from the University of Barcelona here on the sociological aspects of urban space, public space, and also mixed use of the buildings, but also of the public spaces themselves. So, Davide, I think
it's now my turn to draw this meeting to a conclusion, as well as the overall event. So I want to, first of all, say thank you to Roca and to Jasmine, which is the manager of the Roca Gallery here in Beijing, as well as, of course, Shanghai and Barcelona. Again, a big thank you goes to our guests, Ian with me, Shanshan and Yvette, as well as the guests we had in the previous two afternoons in which we met and we discussed all those interesting topics. And further thank you goes, of course, to Ivan and the Mies van der Rohe Foundation for having been such a lovely partner in this venture, which my colleague Jose has been pushing since December, I think, or Jan, sort of. He has been in my office regularly every week to convince me to do this, and we made it happen. So he made a huge effort and a huge work from his side. And one last thank you goes from my side to the technical team, to the technicians of the Xi'an Jiaotong-Liverpool University, who have been working behind the scenes to make happen the exhibition there in Shanghai. So all those three units have been working together. I think it's been quite a successful cooperation. And I leave now to Jose to say something from Shanghai. So to complete the Chinese chapter of this threefold connection.
Thank you very much, Davide. I have to apologize, Sansan, because he had to run. We were getting very long, and she was missing the last train because he has to come back to Hangzhou. So thank you very much. To Sansan, thank you very much also to Yvette, and thank you very much to Jan. I would like to thank also all the people that they have been possible to do this exhibition and this event. I mean, Irene, Katrina, Jasmine from Roca Gallery, Mark also, from Mies Foundation, Ana Ramos, who is the president, Ana Sala, and of course, Ivan. From the university, of course, Davide, because as he was saying, I was pushing a lot and he was very supportive all the time. He never said no. Also all the people from the lab, from the Fab Lab, with Jan and with Lichon in the head, that they were making all the work for the exhibition. And I passed to Ivan.
So thank you, Jose and Davide, obviously to your university, to the Xi'an Jiaotong-Liverpool University, who have also pushed this to be possible together with the Roca, Barcelona, Shanghai, and Beijing galleries. And we are a team working at the Mies van der Rohe Foundation. So a huge thank you to the whole team here, to the teams at the university, at the teams in Shanghai and Beijing, obviously to you, Jan, and also Shanshan, and as Davide was saying, to all our previous guests that have helped us discuss and share a little bit more knowledge. We have to constantly do this. We should do it even more possibly on what's happening in other places so that we can continue learning. And obviously that is also it is absolutely necessary. Also, Yvette, I forgot you because you're just here.
Hi,
But it's also necessary to share that directly in person here with the people that we had in the audience today. So thanking and hoping that we haven't forgotten anybody. We kind of close this event, the 3 sessions plus the exhibition back there in Shanghai plus the videos in Beijing with public space and the Superblocks. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.